They told us Africa was discovered. But how do you discover the very land that gave birth to humanity itself? They told us Africa was poor. But how can poverty exist in the soil that birthed gold, diamonds, mathematics, and empires that stretched beyond imagination? They told us Africa was just Africa. But what if I told you that was never its name? Long before Rome, long before colonizers drew their borders on stolen maps, this land had a name. A sacred name whispered by the ancestors. A name that carried identity, memory, and destiny. That name was Alkebulan, the mother of mankind, the Garden of Eden, the true name of Africa before Africa. And today we are not just uncovering history, we are reclaiming it. The story of how Alkebulan was renamed begins not with Africa itself, but with outsiders looking in. For centuries, those who encountered this vast land struggled to define it. To the ancient Greeks, the entire landmass south of the Mediterranean was called Libya. To others, especially Greek poets and historians, it was Ethiopia, the land of dark-skinned people. These names were never born from the soil. They were labels from distant observers who saw only fragments of Alkebulan's greatness. But the true turning point came with Rome. After the Punic Wars, a brutal series of battles between Rome and Carthage, the Romans claimed Carthaginian territory in what is today Tunisia. The local Berber tribes there were known as the Afri, and so the Romans called the new province Africa Terra, literally, the land of the Afri. At first, this name referred only to a small region of North Africa, not the entire continent. But as Rome expanded its maps and influence, the label grew. Over time, Africa became the official Roman word for lands far beyond Carthage. Slowly, the sacred name Alkebulan faded from written records, while Africa became etched into imperial maps. The story doesn't end there. When European explorers, centuries later, began their voyages of conquest, they carried Roman maps with them. They didn't ask the people what their land was called. They didn't honor Alkebulan. Instead, they reinforced the Roman word and stamped it across every coastline, every border, every nation they charted. The name Africa became global, not because it was true, but because it was imposed. And then came the Berlin Conference of 1884, when European powers gathered to divide the continent like spoils of war. Borders were drawn with rulers and pens, ignoring tribes, kingdoms, and cultures. Maps were printed in London, Paris, and Berlin, and on every one of them the name Africa was written in bold. Not Alkebulan, not the mother of mankind, just Africa. This renaming was more than cartography. It was identity theft. By stripping away Alkebulan, outsiders took away not just a word, but a worldview. They replaced a name that carried life, culture, and ancestry with one that carried conquest, subjugation, and foreign control. Alkebulan was buried under centuries of colonization, replaced with a name that told its children nothing of who they were, only what conquerors saw. What began as a local Roman label had become the defining identity of an entire continent, and the world has called it Africa ever since. Alkebulan is more than just a forgotten name. It is a word that carries memory, identity, and destiny. To call Africa Alkebulan is to speak a truth that predates maps, empires, and borders. It is to acknowledge this land as the mother of mankind, the womb of humanity itself. Modern science now confirms what our ancestors already knew. Fossils of the earliest human beings, like Lucy discovered in Ethiopia, prove that humanity's journey began right here. DNA studies reveal that every living human traces their ancestry back to Alkebulan. In other words, every nation, every people, every civilization carries the imprint of this land in their blood. To call it Alkebulan is to remember that this is not just one continent among many. It is the beginning of them all. But Alkebulan means more than biology. It means greatness. It means the Nile Valley civilizations, where ancient Egyptians aligned pyramids with the stars and charted the movements of planets long before telescopes existed. It means Nubia, a land of fierce warriors and queens. It means Ethiopia, a nation so ancient that it was mentioned in the earliest scriptures of the Bible. Alkebulan means Timbuktu, where scholars studied astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy, while much of Europe was still in the Dark Ages. It means the Kingdom of Mali, where Mansa Musa, the richest man in history, ruled with wisdom, power, and unimaginable wealth. It means the great stone cities of Zimbabwe, the golden kingdoms of Ghana, and the sophisticated trade routes that connected Alkebulan to Arabia, India, and China centuries before the rise of modern Europe. This land has always been more than what colonizers later called the Dark Continent. The Alkebulan was the shining cradle of civilization, a beacon of culture, wealth, and wisdom. The very word carried a worldview, that this land was sacred, that its children were heirs of greatness, and that the destiny of humanity itself was tied to its soil, and that is why the name matters. When you say Africa, you speak a label given by outsiders after conquest. But when you say Alkebulan, you speak of the original truth. You are calling on the spirit of the ancestors, the memory of empires, the pulse of humanity's beginning. Alkebulan is not just a forgotten word. It is the truest reflection of who we are, who we were, and who we can still become. If Alkebulan was such a powerful name carrying history, memory, and pride, why then is it forgotten? Why is it not taught in schools, not written in maps, not spoken on the lips of millions who live here today? The answer is simple, yet devastating. Power. When invaders come, they take more than land, they take identity. To control a people, you must control how they see themselves, and that begins with language. By erasing Alkebulan and replacing it with Africa, outsiders achieved more than conquest. They rewrote reality. Think about it. A name like Alkebulan tells you that you are the mother of mankind, the birthplace of civilization, the soil of beginnings. It tells you that you carry in your blood the memory of kings, queens, warriors, and scholars. It anchors your identity in greatness. But a name like Africa, imposed by Rome and spread by colonizers, tells you nothing. It becomes a blank slate, a name empty enough for others to fill with their own stories. Stories of inferiority, darkness, and conquest. When European powers began colonizing Alkebulan, they carried maps stamped with the Roman word. They erased local names, languages, and cultures. In their schools, they taught African children not of Alkebulan's glory, but of Europe's civilizing mission. They painted Africa as backward, poor, and primitive, a continent waiting to be rescued. And by burying Alkebulan, they buried the evidence of a truth too powerful for colonization to survive. That this land was never inferior, but foundational. The Berlin Conference of 1884 made this erasure complete. In that infamous meeting, European powers gathered in Berlin to slice Alkebulan into artificial nations, dividing it like a cake without a single African voice at the table. And on every one of their maps, the word Africa was written in bold. Not Alkebulan, not the mother of mankind. Africa, a word that belonged to Rome, not to its children. The erasure was deliberate, because names are not just labels, they are weapons. To rename Alkebulan was to strip away dignity, memory, and pride. It was to reduce the world's motherland to a land of resources, slaves, and colonies. That is why most of us grow up never hearing the word Alkebulan. It was hidden, silenced, erased, because it carried too much power. Because to speak it is to awaken something that colonizers never wanted awakened, the knowledge of who we truly are. But history, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of resurfacing. The name Alkebulan is rising again, not in whispers but in voices, in movements, in the heartbeat of a people who are tired of carrying the names given by their oppressors. To speak Alkebulan today is to resist erasure. It is to reclaim memory. It is to plant our feet firmly in the soil of identity and say, this is who we are and this is where we come from. Reclaiming Alkebulan is not about nostalgia. It is about power. Because names are more than words. They shape how we see ourselves and how the world sees us. When children grow up believing they come from a continent defined only by the word Africa, a word imposed by Rome, passed down through conquest. They inherit a broken story. But when children grow up learning the name Alkebulan, they inherit pride. They inherit the knowledge that their land is the mother of mankind, that they are the descendants of builders, thinkers, warriors, and creators. This is why Alkebulan matters, because identity is everything. Without it, we are at the mercy of those who write history for us, but with it, we reclaim the pen. We reclaim the narrative. Imagine a diaspora scattered across the globe, from the Americas to the Caribbean to Europe, rising together under one name. Not a name stamped by colonizers, but a name whispered by ancestors. Alkebulan is that name. It binds together Africans and all descendants of Africa's children, reminding us that no matter where we are part of the same story, and this reclamation is already happening. Pan-African movements, Afrocentric scholars, musicians, and storytellers are reviving Alkebulan in their work. Cultural leaders are calling for education systems to teach the true name of this land. Social media is amplifying voices that were once silenced, spreading the word that Alkebulan still lives. But this is not just about awareness. It is about action. To reclaim Alkebulan, we must choose to use it. We must teach it to our children. We must write it in our books, speak it in our conversations, and carry it in our art, our music, our prayers. Because every time we say Alkebulan, we breathe life back into the memory that colonizers tried to bury. This is the call. A call to stop being defined by what was given to us and to reclaim what was always ours. To stop answering to a borrowed name, and to rise once again under the name of the mother of mankind. To say Alkebulan is to say we remember, we resist, we reclaim. Imagine a world where the word Africa is no longer seen as a symbol of poverty, struggle, or colonization, but replaced once more with its original name, Alkebulan. Imagine maps across the globe bearing the word given by ancestors, not conquerors. Imagine passports stamped with Alkebulan. Imagine schools across the continent teaching children that they come from the mother of mankind, from the Garden of Eden, from the soil of beginnings. This is not fantasy. This is vision, a vision of a continent no longer carrying the burden of imposed labels, but reclaiming its true identity. Because names shape destiny. To call ourselves Alkebulan would be to declare to the world that we are more than what history books wrote about us. We are more than slavery, more than colonization, more than division. We are the origin, the foundation, the root of humanity. Think of the pride this would awaken. A child in Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia, South Africa, or the diaspora in America or Brazil would know that they belong to something sacred. They would know that their homeland is not a broken continent, but Alkebulan, the womb of civilization, the source of kings and queens, the land where humanity first rose. That knowledge would transform how they walk, how they dream, how they build, and it goes beyond pride. Reclaiming Alkebulan would mean unity. The borders drawn in Berlin were designed to divide us, but Alkebulan reminds us that before there were lines, there was one land, one mother, one name. North, south, east, and west were never separate in the eyes of the ancestors. They were children of the same soil. If we embraced Alkebulan once more, perhaps we would see ourselves not as 54 fragmented nations, but as one people with one destiny. In this vision, Alkebulan is not just a name of the past. It is a name for the future, a banner under which the continent rises. A name that heals the wound of division and restores the dignity that centuries of erasure tried to destroy. So the question is not, can it happen? The question is, will we choose it? Will we dare to speak Alkebulan into existence again? Because Alkebulan is not just a word. It is a key to memory, a key to power, a key to destiny. And when we unlock it, we will rediscover not only who we were, but who we are meant to become. Before Africa, there was Alkebulan, the mother of mankind, the Garden of Eden, the name that carries our memory, our pride, and our destiny. For too long, this truth was buried. replaced by labels that never belonged to us. But now the question is, will we reclaim it? This is not just history, it is identity. And identity is power. To speak Alkebulan is to rise, to remember, and to resist the stories others wrote for us. It is to declare to the world that we are more than what they said we were. We are the beginning. We are the heartbeat of humanity. If this message moved you, don't let it end here. Be part of the journey to reclaim Alkebulan by sharing your voice. Leave a comment below. What does Alkebulan mean to you? Hit the like button if you believe this truth must be told. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel so you never miss the stories, the mysteries, and the truths they tried to erase. Together, we can awaken the world to Alkebulan. Together we can reclaim the name and reclaim the story.